Hello, everyone. So this is colloquium session number 2 for the Bascom Honor Society. And I'm happy today what we're going to be doing is having a content session to hear about what's going on in the 2020 election. So we've asked a number of students to prepare some questions for our panelists. And we do have 3 distinguished panelists with us today. We have Dr. James Hart, political scientist, and also Director of Office of Study Abroad. We also have Dr. Charles Kaiser, professor in the School of Business and with a law background as well. Is that right, Chuck?
Yes, sir.
And then Dr. Lisa Lilly, professor in the Department of History. And really today, the purpose of this session is for us to have an opportunity to answer some questions about what is arguably one of the most important elections in maybe the modern era since World War II. I know we say that every time there's a presidential election, but it certainly seems to be the case this year. And so this is really an election roundtable. So I have a variety of questions that I'll be asking. And these are questions that came from students. And we're just going to have a little bit of a discussion among our expert panels. So panelists, are you ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Terrific. So our first question is, what do you think will be the most important factors that influence who wins the election? And we'll just go ahead and let whoever wants to get started.
Well, I can begin by talking about a national survey by Pew taken at the beginning of August. So that means it's before the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But that poll suggested that the 4 most important issues in descending order were the economy, healthcare, the Supreme Court, and the virus. They were more important than racial and economic inequality, foreign policy, guns, violent crime. And so when we look at those 4, each of them can be broken down into subsets.
Mm-hmm.
So I turn it over to someone else to add to that.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Thanks. So it's interesting too that you bring up polling, because I think one of the most misunderstood elements of the 2016 election was people claiming that the pollsters had got it all wrong. But if you actually look at the polls, you go to Nate Silver's, 538, whatever, they were about popular vote. They were within the margin of error. Of course, they didn't quite bank on the Electoral College, but what's even more revealing are the state polls. And the state polls hadn't correctly identified the number of white, non-college educated people who would turn out for the election. These are people who normally don't vote historically or vote in fewer numbers. And they came out largely for the current president. And I think it'll be interesting to see whether, and so a large number of people too also who were undecided and then broke for Trump at the last minute. So it will be interesting to see if that sort of momentum carries through this time. And then also I think the other big factor is, of course, election security and with what will happen with people who choose to vote by mail and whether or not their votes are all accurately tabulated.
Right, and I would say that as Jim pointed out, we've got some subcategories within those policy matters. We've got healthcare, but that really gets into the coronavirus response, whether there will be a vaccine, whether it be distributed, how that impacts voters. We're seeing bizarre polling about how people have very little faith in the vaccine process already and hasn't been introduced yet. And then you've got the whole pre-existing condition, Affordable Care Act, healthcare stuff, drug prices, the social justice stuff. But then Lisa got into the non-policy matters, if you will, and there's plenty of those. We see a very, very strong turnout amongst early voters. We see a very strong turnout among young voters that did not vote. I've seen polling in the last couple of days which suggests that young voters will have turnout similar to 2008, which broke heavily towards the Democrats. But the non-policy matters that I think will have at least some impact are things like character, corruption, demographics. We've got urban versus rural voters. Urban clearly outnumbering the rural, but Electoral College wise, not so much. We've got some debate performances. We're going to have some very interesting social media issues with election security.
Yeah,
And
the
then we've
influence
got,
of the Russians.
right, you know, the influence of the Russians. We got one party that's amplifying what the CIA suggests is a Russian effort, if you will, to influence the election in favor of one candidate. So it'll be interesting. I honestly think that character, maybe I'm hopeful and wishful thinking, I'm thinking character will have a bigger impact here than it has in the past because we are a very divided nation. We're a very, very on edge, if you will, nation. And character will drive people to the polls more than normal, I think, because I think there's a fatigue, if you will, with the drama and the constant barrage of lying and disinformation. I think we're just tired of that. So hopefully that'll motivate people.
Yeah, two important aspects of this Pew survey are the following. Number one, climate change is not in the top 10 of issues that people find to be important. Below climate change is part of the healthcare issue, the issue of abortion. That's listed as number 12. In light of the death of Ruth Ginsburg and the presumed likelihood that the president is going to appoint someone who is opposed to Roe versus Wade, I suspect that in the next 6 weeks, abortion is going to become very important. It's going to become very important to the demographic that is watching this program now.
Well, Dr. Harf, let's go ahead and hold there is a question about the nomination process for Supreme Court and the events that'll follow.
Yeah.
So let's hold off on that. And but it sounds like when I'm listening to all of you, there's like lots of things, lots of factors that are going to influence it. Everything from issues and character, but you're even saying some of just the mechanics of having an election during a pandemic, like mail-in voting, turnout. And in fact, turnout is a second issue that one of our students were curious about. What do you think can encourage more people, and especially young people, to vote? So this is kind of a follow-on to the previous question. What can we do to encourage people to vote?
Well, we have to make certain that they are directly impacted by what happens. We always say all politics is local, all politics is also personal. And unless people begin to realize that there are specific consequences for them on the outcome of the election, they are less likely to vote.
Well, yeah, and today is National Voter Registration Day. So first of all, you got to get registered. And Jim's absolutely right. You got to make this personal. And I think there are plenty of personal issues for people to grab onto. We've mentioned some of them, whether it's women's right to choose, healthcare, Medicaid expansion. You really got to get people to understand the perils of not voting. And we've seen the perils of not voting in sufficient numbers that, 3 of the last 4 presidential elections, the popular vote winner has not been elected president. And that's a direct effect of people not getting out and getting to the voting booth. We also have to make sure that people think it's safe. There are, as Lisa pointed out, there are tons of people that think that mail-in voting might not be secure, computerized voting isn't any good. And so there are efforts to really educate people in a negative way that their vote won't matter, their vote doesn't count, and you really have to combat that. Mm-hmm. Anything you can do to encourage people to understand, as Jim said, the importance of personal issues to them, and to convince them that their vote will have an impact on those personal issues to them. And that's the key that I think has been missing.
Yeah, absolutely. And to second that, I would also say that what I do hear from people who don't participate in this process, they often say, well, what is one vote going to matter? And as a matter of fact, it's going to matter quite a bit. There have been many more, of course, local races and things that have been decided sometimes even by one vote, but more often by a few thousand or something like that. But the most glaring example, I think, that of one vote really counting is the passage of women's right to vote, which was passed in 1919 and then ratified in 1920. And had to go through a state-by-state process. And it went down to one vote in Tennessee, and it was a gentleman who changed his mind at the last minute because he got a telegram from his mother who essentially guilted him into voting for the women's right to vote. Now so we are here in 2020 with 100 years of women, just 100 years of women being able to vote. So one vote can really change the tide. So, you can use those examples, talk to your friends, make it injected into your conversations. I know we're all feeling a lot of fatigue with the kind of constant grind of the election cycle, but if you're tired now, imagine how tired you will be if you're not part of this process, and then the next administration, whoever that may be, makes decisions that will impact your life, and they will. Just because they're at the top of the government process, it will trickle down, and there will be a cascade of effects if you do or don't vote.
I think it's important is for young people to understand the process. Most of them don't understand the registration process, the actual voting early or absentee process. We have students from all over the country. So I think to get the young people out to vote, going to uvote.org or whatever those websites are that explain exactly what the processes are and how easy it actually can be to vote. It's not waiting in line like you see on television 8 hours a day on election day, Tuesday. There are a number of ways you can vote that don't have you do that and are still very valid.
Actually, I'm glad you said something about that, Chuck, because at Maryville, what we've tried to do is really direct all of our students, and for that matter, faculty and staff could do the same thing, is to go to Get Involved MU. And if you go there and log in, you will get a turbo vote pop-up where you can enter in your information for registration, and it will help you facilitate all of our students in terms of getting registered to vote. Not only that, but it will also send reminders as deadlines come up, for instance, to request an absentee ballot, or when the actual voting time is available. And it doesn't matter where a person wants to register to vote. So if we have a student, for instance, from Texas who's on our campus and wants to maintain their registration for Texas, they can do it through TurboVote at Get Involved MU. And in fact, we'll see some videos at the end of this session today that will be encouraging all of our students to do that. So the more we can make it easy, I think, for young people to vote and for all people to vote, the more likely we are to encourage more people to vote. And we've seen that across the United States. Every place where they've provided more opportunities for people to vote in different ways at different times, there is more people voting. It's just that simple. But also, I think this is a follow-up, and it was mentioned already before. There was a question about, or mention of the difference. Dr. Kaiser mentioned the fact that 3 of the last 4 elections were actually the popular vote winner did not win the presidency. Seems kind of anti-democratic, and not really in the sense of one person, one vote, and the winner is the person who gets the most votes. And that really turns down to the Electoral College. And so the Electoral College and popular vote have been different in several recent elections. Is the Electoral College still the way we should be electing the president?
Well, I think you have to answer that question historically. The founding fathers were really elitists. They wanted to have the people participate, but they were afraid that the people were not yet prepared to participate democratically. And so they created a republic, and they created lots of structures that gave a sense, an illusion of democracy, but really allowed the elite to participate. For example, the federal judges are selected by the president with the advice and consent of the Senate. The Senate was not elected by the people, only the House of Representatives. The president wasn't. Now, what has happened in some of those instances, they've moved toward democracy. They have not in the Electoral College. And what has happened is, I think we all would acknowledge that the rationale, the historical rationale for the Electoral College does not exist anymore. And it's time to go to the direct selection of the president. The problem is the Electoral College tends to favor one political party over the other political party. And so thus it would be very difficult to change that.
Dr. Lilly, I saw you nodding your head. So was that nodding in agreement that we should be changing things, or just in agreement with what Dr. Harf had to say?
I would say yes and yes, but to a couple of things to that. So yes, and definitely the founding fathers, most of them, not all, but most of them were come up from an upper echelon of society. There were notable exceptions. Those of you who have seen, the musical Alexander Hamilton will remember that he was afraid of what they were afraid of mob rule, essentially. You also are dealing with an electorate or with young country, young citizens who they also considered very uneducated, even by the standards of their day, and there weren't a lot of educational institutions available. I personally think that there is little justification to retain the Electoral College. However, I do feel that if we were to set about dismantling it, then what we would also need, and this might be apple pie in the sky, idealism here, but is a revamped push to establish more teaching of civics in public schools from a very early age onwards. Because I mean, if I ask my students in any one of my classes now, even who are your state senators, probably 75% couldn't tell me. And that level of unwillful ignorance is, unfortunately, I think that to a certain degree it has been baked into the system, because it is advantageous for certain groups to have an uneducated electorate. People who are uneducated tend to be, they don't have as many tools to sift fact from fiction. Now I'm not like bashing anybody who doesn't go to college, absolutely not. And not everybody should go to college, but that's all the more reason why we need to have more civics education free and as part of our public schools from a young age onwards.
Well, to echo what Jim said, the Electoral College was set up hundreds of years ago. We did not have political parties in those days. We had 13 or 14 states by the time it came around. We had slavery in half the states. And so the entire premise upon which we had the Electoral College, in addition to what Lisa said, is that we needed the southern states to ratify the Constitution. And so to get them to do that, since they were not very populous, or they were populous with slaves who could not vote, we said, first of all, we'll give slaves at least 3/5 of a person for the census part, and then we'll get you representation for your state so that it has at least some power. The result of that was, for 32 of the first 36 years of the United States, we had a slave-owning Virginian as a president, literally for 32 of the first 36 years, because Virginia was the most populous southern state, and it had enough power to overpower with everyone else the other votes. That system doesn't exist anymore. That process doesn't exist anymore. So if you do the math, for example, California has 55 electoral votes, Wyoming has 3. But each one of those electoral votes in California represents almost 715,000 people. In Wyoming, it represents 193,000 people. That's not one person, one vote anymore. And we're seeing the same thing. We're seeing the same thing in the balance of the Senate. I mean, the Senate is controlled sort of by the same way. We're not going to change the Senate, at least not anytime soon, but we could have a more responsive election for president and vice. And by the way, in those days we had the Electoral College. Whoever came in second was vice president. So nothing is the same as it was then. And it's time that we change this process.
There's one other aspect about the Electoral College. Again, it preceded political parties. The idea was that the people would elect wise men, and I mean men, who then would meet and decide who shall be president and who shall be vice president. Today, the Electoral College is made up of loyal hacks of each political party. Unnecessary.
Yeah, but one of the concerns that's often raised about if we were to get rid of the Electoral College would be that basically the candidates would only go to a handful of the very largest states, and the rest of the country's issues and ideas would be ignored. So how would you respond to that?
I've got a perfect one. I've got a perfect one. You don't see the current Republican in California right now, other than for a quick stopover. It's the most populous state. It's on fire, literally. And because he is not going to get those states' electoral votes, he's not campaigning there. He's written them off. He will spend more time in a state with 175 or 250,000 or how many people it's got in a small state than he will in the most populous state, where he could garner a fair number of votes. California has elected Republican governors numerous times in my lifetime. So there are plenty of Republicans there. He just doesn't care. I lived in Utah. My daughter said, if I'm going to vote for President Obama, for example, why go vote? Because Utah's never going to vote in the Electoral College for a Democrat. Her vote means more if it's counted in whatever.
It's even worse than that, Chuck. It's even worse than that. The candidates only go to 4 or 5 states that are contested. And we're not going to see a presidential candidate in Missouri because they believe that the Republican candidate will win the state of Missouri. If there was a toss-up, they would be here.
Correct.
Yeah, having lived in a swing state before, it was a constant barrage of visits and campaign ads. So in some respect, I think I'd agree with you to say that even if we were to get rid of the Electoral College, the candidates would still focus most of their attention on the most populous states. But of course, there is a third option, right? Which is to modify the Electoral College, like Maine does, or like the compact that exists among several states, where they have agreed that once enough states agree to the compact, that whoever gets the popular vote, whoever wins the national popular vote, would also then automatically win the Electoral College.
Or do it by congressional district rather than statewide.
No. You can't do it by congressional district. Well, you can do it by congressional district.
And you have two extra votes, statewide votes.
Yeah. It could happen. I'm not sure that solves the issue. If it's done congressional district within state, that's a different issue. But you should, Alden, we can lump the Electoral College reforms into gerrymandering reforms and a whole bunch of other ones that we probably need to do in light of what we thought were guardrails that don't seem to exist anymore.
Mm-hmm. Should we maybe explain what gerrymandering means for those who may not be familiar with the term?
Sure. If you want me to go or you want to go?
No, you go.
All right. Gerrymandering is a process. It takes, your state is allowed so many congressional districts by virtue of the census, which, by the way, is coming up another reason to go do the census and to vote. Because the party that controls the state legislature at the time of the 10-year sentence gets to draw the congressional districts. A great example is Utah. The city of Salt Lake City is a Democratic city. The entire rest of the state is Republican. The state decided that they would draw the congressional districts and essentially draw across right through the middle of Salt Lake City, so that a fourth went to one district, the fourth went to another district, the fourth went to the third, and the fourth went somewhere else. So that despite having a fairly large population of Democrats in Salt Lake City, it has no Democratic congressional representative. On every other election, it seems like one of them prevails. But they diluted that population into the very Republican other areas. And so you get lines drawn for congressional districts that are based purely on where voters of a certain party live and how you can minimize the impact of the party of choice of those voters. And it's totally done to preserve party control of congressional seats. It has nothing to do with fairness. It has nothing to do with population. It has everything to do with trying to control power. And that's one of the reasons why down ballot races are so important, because state legislatures have historically been tilting in the last 20 or 30 years to Republicans, and governorships and state legislatures have redrawn those districts such that we get very, very skewed congressional districts And that'll come up again when we talk about the next question on what happens if one of the candidates passes away.
That's a great segue there for us. And, I'm trying to keep an eye on the time as we move forward. So let's go ahead. We've talked a little bit about the Electoral College, about the challenges that we face in terms of one person, one vote. But ultimately, this election will be here. Eventually, it will come, although it feels like it's been 4 years in the coming. We're less than 2 months away now. But we have a very unique set of candidates this time. And so a question came in that was, both of the major candidates would be the oldest person elected to the presidency. And we are going through a pandemic which disproportionately affects the elderly. What would happen if a candidate dies before November 3rd, that is election day, or before inauguration day?
Oh, and let me tell you something. It's even more complicated than that. You have the period before November 3rd. If a candidate dies before November 3rd, the political party puts a name in or tells people how to vote. That's an easy one. But in the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December, the Electoral College meets. If the candidate who gets the most electoral votes, or will get the most elected votes, dies before they meet, then you have a problem. Then the next problem occurs if the Electoral College meets in mid-December and makes a decision, but haven't officially given it to the Congress when they convene in early January, you have a third period. So there are 4 different time periods, and the answer is different for each of those time periods to the question that you just asked.
Yes, indeed. I have little to add to that.
Did we lose Dr. Kaiser?
We lost visual, looks like. Oh,
There
there
he is. He's back. Dr. Kaiser, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
he's muted.
Lost you for a second there.
Jim's right. It's absolutely crazy about what happens and when it happens. But let's take it one issue further. And that is, if it actually goes to a vote in the House, which if we don't have a president officially designated by the time the current president's term ends, then it goes to a vote of the House. But the House vote is interesting in that each state's delegation gets one vote. And here's where the gerrymandering links in. Even though the House has a very, very Democratic majority right now, if you look state by state, there are 26 states that have more Republican representatives than Democrats. There are only 22 that have more Democrats than Republicans. There are 2 ties. So if the delegation took a poll and said, well, we want to vote for this candidate or that candidate, and they're not obligated to vote for the candidate of their party, but we've seen pretty straight line voting as it has been, you could easily have a president who might have lost the popular vote and win a vote in the House by a House that is controlled by the other side's party. So you'd have almost a double whammy, if you will, to use a not a very technical term. And that's, again, a problem. It's astounding to me that we have a system where we are guaranteeing certain lines of succession, if you will, to minority parties or a minority party candidate. And we're guaranteeing that.
The phrase, Chuck, is minority governing.
Yes.
Governing by the minority.
Yep.
All right. So I think that clears that up. As you said, it's pretty clear that if it happens before the election, then the party can go ahead and nominate someone else. If it happens before Inauguration Day, then there are procedures for handling that. We have another question here that unfortunately has to deal with death as well, as it turns out, and it's a sad passing of a very historic female leader in the history of the nation. And one of the students, this occurred this past week, and a student asked, what does Ruth Bader Ginsburg passing mean for the election?
Mhm.
for the Republican Party and for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I'll go first on this one if you don't mind. Since I'm teaching a women and gender studies course right now, we were just talking about this. So I'll just take the first. So first of all, you should know who Ruth Bader Ginsburg was, and if you don't, you should really look her up. She was a tireless fighter, a champion for the rights of women and minorities, and she. There's even a movie recently, I think Hollywood did something called On the Basis of Sex. And really look into her rulings are very, very interesting. So for the Republican Party, it means that they get to nominate another Supreme Court justice. Traditionally, right, we've had 9, although there's no reason we could theoretically have more. The Republican Party has already pledged, Mitch McConnell, of course, has pledged that that seat will be filled. 2 senators, I think, now have come out against voting before the election. So I believe Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and I think Susan Collins of Maine also said
That's
that.
correct.
And but we would need 4 in order to delay or to shoot down a new justice. You would need, I think, 4 Republican senators to defect, if you want to use that word, and not vote on a nominee or to cancel that out. So for the Republican Party, it constitutes what I think they've long desired, which is to have an opportunity to put to certain landmark cases again to the test. The most foremost being Roe versus Wade. So 1973, I believe, a landmark decision which granted women the right to an abortion, basically due to a right to privacy kind of issue. And on other issues as well. So it is standing knowledge that the Republican Party is opposed to the ACA or Obamacare, and that has been challenged repeatedly and probably will be challenged again. So things like that the ACA covered, like pre-existing conditions, you still have to be covered. For those of you who are on your parents' health insurance, after the ACA was passed, there was an extension to the age of 26 that you could stay on your parents' health insurance. Those are the kinds of things that would go away if the ACA or if Obamacare were repealed. For the Democratic Party, it's a little bit more difficult to understand. If you look at the fundraising, though, that happened in the first 24 hours after her passing, it's pretty remarkable. If you want to go to Act Blue is sort of an umbrella organization that aggregates a lot of Democratic fundraising, and they made something like $50 million in less than 24 hours. A lot of which, if you look at the way that the political discussions are going on Twitter and other places, seems to be motivated by her passing. So it may very well galvanize a Democratic side that had been, there was still, I think, some sniping in some quarters about Bernie Sanders not being the nominee, and other people feeling jilted or being worried about Biden being too much of a centrist or something like that. So it may very well galvanize the Democrats into a more cohesive voting bloc. We'll see.
It's interesting that the Republican Party apparently believes that they're acting as quickly as possible to select a new Supreme Court justice is in their best interest. I disagree with that. I think the Democratic Party, rather than the Republican Party, will benefit if the Republican Party moves quickly to replace her. One of the issues is you have several Republican senators up for re-election in hotly contested elections, and that's going to be a factor. My own personal view is that everyone who was going to vote for the president because he was going to put a anti-abortionist in the Supreme Court was already going to vote for the president. On the other hand, I think it was not in the front of the brain for most of the Democrats, and that her passing has made it much more urgent, and particularly among young people. You're talking about the Democrats they raised $100 million in 24 hours of her passing tells me that they're going to be energized.
I would agree completely with what both of you said. I'd amplify what Jim said. The people that are really gung-ho about replacing Justice Ginsburg with a more conservative, maybe even right-wing person, we're already voting for the president. It has put Republicans in a position to try and explain a complete disingenuous. I mean, these are many of the same senators who said we can't possibly approve a Supreme Court justice 240 days, 100 and some odd days, whatever it was, before
8 months.
The last election, are saying, no, 42 days is plenty. And they're really working themselves into pretzel-like twists to explain why it's so different. And the citations to history are back in the 1800s, and they're not very good citations. That's number one. I would also say that it is, Jim and Lisa both, young voters. Act Blue raised $30 million online in 12 hours. Those are not big donor people. Those are online young voters who know what they're doing. And I would say, though, the one benefit that this does for the Republicans, and especially for President Trump, is everybody is now focused on this seat. We're not talking 200,000 deaths. We're not talking children in cages. We're not talking social unrest. We're not talking crime. We are all following the latest, greatest thing. It's over there. And that really inures to the benefit of the president. There, as Alden once told me in a hallway in a conversation, that there are so many things that we could be focusing on that it's dizzying to try to even list some of them that would be a negative in any other election. I mean, just last night, the president said only really affects old people, and it's not that big a deal. I'm talking coronavirus. That's a week after he said he's playing it up, a week after he's quoted as playing it down. This week he's playing it down, but he doesn't really have to, because there's this distraction over the Supreme Court seat. And as a lawyer who's licensed to practice in the Supreme Court, it's an incredibly important thing. But it can't be a distraction from the myriad other things that we should be focusing on, because frankly, I think the Democrats don't win this battle. I think the Republicans will do what they will. They'll push somebody through. It's astounding to me that we've got senators, the most deliberative body in the world, according to them, who are saying we will vote for this candidate. They don't even know who the candidate is. They could nominate Mickey Mouse at this point, and Mickey Mouse would be on the bench, because the votes, as McConnell says, the votes are there. As long as Mickey Mouse will support the things that Lisa says are up for grabs this time, that's who's going to get approved. And to Jim's point, that's not going to help them in the long run. It may help them in some court cases, but in the long run, that will unleash a backlash. And if it happens that they do this vote to approve a replacement after the election that Trump lost and the Senate changed hands, but they do it in a lame duck, I think the Democrats will take every glove off. The Marcus of Queensberry rules go away, and we'll see court packing. We'll see filibuster reform. We'll see a whole host of things, because I think the Republicans will have stepped over lines that we don't know that any exist, but they might still be some. They've stepped over them if that's the case. And that's a high likelihood. That's actually a possibility.
Yeah, just in a word, let me ask each of the panelists, will there be a Supreme Court justice approved before the next inauguration?
Yes.
Yes.
Inauguration? Yes.
Yeah, before inauguration. Yeah, I'd agree 100%. But since we're doing some predictions here, I want to point to the polling and a prediction about what's coming. So former Vice President Biden continues to lead in the poll, in almost every poll, and every kind of even when we average polling. How likely are we to be blindsided like we were in 2016? So students want to know, hey, in 2016, Hillary Clinton was expected to win, and she lost, and President Trump won. And it's looking the same way this time. How likely is it to happen this time?
Well, Lisa said quite frankly, that the popular vote was within the margin of error. There are some differences this time. One difference is that the polls have been consistent for a longer period of time. Number two, the last time Trump was running, he had no record. He has a record now, and people are passing judgment on that record. And so I have a higher degree of confidence in what the polls are saying today as compared to 2016. I think, and one final point, the big thing in 2016, a lot of people were going to vote for Trump, but they did not want to tell people that they were going to. I really think this time there are a lot of people who voted for Trump the last time who are going to vote against Trump this time, but are afraid to tell people that they're changing their vote.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I'd add that Biden's negatives in the polls are nowhere near as bad as Hillary Clinton's negatives were. So there were people that voted for Trump. They could not stomach the idea of voting for Hillary Clinton. That doesn't exist. The other thing that exists this time is there are a number of polls where Biden is up around 50 or 51%. So that means that even if the undecideds break towards Trump, there's not enough to get him over the 50% that Biden already has. Now, surprises? Yeah, there could be surprises. Lisa pointed one out earlier. We don't know what the mechanisms of voting might be in some cases. There are some states that are refusing what we call naked ballots, people that have mailed in ballots without the proper formalities, and they're just being rejected out of hand, which is by law illegal. But we have a ton of people voting by mail that have never done it before. They're not an educated electorate, and there may be a significant number of ballots that just aren't counted, and I'm not sure how that's going to break. We do have some other, what we would call October surprises. There's the whole Bill Barr Burnham report that's coming out that is supposed to link Joe Biden to Hunter Biden to Burisma in the Ukraine, which I think at this point is the powder's been wet long enough that doesn't matter. The coronavirus vaccine may be a wild card. We just saw yesterday that the Attorney General for the state of New York says there's justification to investigate both the president and his organization for tax fraud. That could go ahead and be a surprise. I don't think we'll see a swing and be blindsided, but I think our eyes are a little more open this time. I mean, it would have to be, I didn't think the president that we have now was going to win last time, but I'm not counting him out this time. And I think he's got a less chance this time. If you do some of the polling, he's got a lead. Jim's right. The leads are there. They've been consistent. And they're leads in states that if he wins, the current president has no path to victory electoral college-wise. So I don't think we'll be blindsided as badly.
That's a great way of putting it, Chuck. I don't think we'll be blindsided as badly. There are a couple of things just off the top of my head that I think could be very influential. One is just the whole logistics of voting again, and to see how late ballots that come in, if and how they are challenged. Also, polling places and people being unable to find a polling place to vote. Here's something I recommend doing if you are, I think this is for whatever political party you belong to, or if you belong to none. One of the problems that we have this election cycle in particular is a lack of poll workers, people who are at the places where you go to vote, who hand you, your ballot, who, in large part because of coronavirus, because usually the vast majority of people who work at these stations are elderly or retired and are volunteering their time. What? Sorry?
I resent that because I signed up to be a poll worker this year.
That came out of my mouth, and then I realized, Chuck, that both you and Jim have also worked as poll workers, and that was not at all my intention.
But it's true though. I'm the youngster of the group, so what does that tell you?
So, but I'm actually volunteering to work at polling. I've never done it before. You can sign up through this link that I just posted to the chat. And it's that's the national one. It should reroute you to your local Missouri or Illinois or wherever you hail from. And we really, really do need people to work these stations. Otherwise, the number of places where you can actually vote will be severely reduced. And if people, and not everyone has transportation, and also with public transportation, fewer people are wanting to take that because of coronavirus. So we really do need people to get involved and to make sure those stations are open. So that's one. And the other thing is, you may have noticed that recently the current leader of the Postal Service, DeJoy, was chastised before a panel hearing because there had been some very unusual changes to the way the postal system works. And for any of you who have been waiting for mail, you may have found that your mail service has been disrupted. And that is, DeJoy's explanation was that this was supposed to be a streamlining of the postal service. This involved a lot of dismantling of sorting machines, the reduction of hours, the elimination of overtime, to get the Postal Service out of debt. And actually, the Postal Service has been doing quite a bit better in recent years. And the reason that they're in debt is because of a law that was passed by the Senate a while back. So the thing is, it's a self-created conundrum. So I think that we will really see what happens with the voting, and then to what extent the early voting and the absentee voting and vote by mail kind of process, those are actually counted fairly. That I think that could throw a wrench in things.
Yeah, and
let me put a quick.
I'm going to have to ask to try to close this because we're running a little bit out of time here, and we have some videos that we also need to show. It is clear that this election is going to be unlike any other we've had, primarily because of the pandemic and the challenges that you've raised. And of course, those challenges fall heavier and heaviest on more disadvantaged communities. And we've already seen in some states where mail-in ballots have been already discarded disproportionately for people of color. So there's a variety of real challenges for all people to be able to vote, and particularly in this case. But I need to take us to our last question. And I think this is one that a lot of people are curious how you feel about. At the end, elections mean something. Voting means something. It means someone wins. Someone becomes the president, the most powerful person in the world, essentially. So presidential elections, I think of them as the most powerful decision-making that takes place in the world, because the president of the United States wields power like no other leader in the world. So with that, we'll just go down the list. Who do you think will win the presidential election this year, and why? Keep it kind of succinct if you can.
Biden's going to win the election. 538, the premier polling group gives him a 77% chance versus 22 for Trump. You also have to consider the Senate. The 3 Republican seats have to flip to become Democratic seats if Biden wins. 4 have to flip. If Trump wins, I think the Senate will flip and become Democratic.
All right.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Oh man, I hesitate to make a prediction. I will tentatively agree with Dr. Harf. I think that so far, if the trends hold, it looks likely that Biden will win.
Okay, easy answer. Biden wins a popular vote. 9 out of 10 experts in a place called Polyvote predict Biden would win the popular vote. As Jim said, 77% chance of winning the Electoral College. Why? 27% of Americans polled think the country's on the right track. 70% think it's on the wrong track. That's really bad for an incumbent. With all the other things he's got going on, if 77% of people polled think the country's on the right track, he should not be reelected. And I think Biden wins on that basis.
All right, so it sounds pretty much like our panel believes that former Vice President Biden will be future President Biden at the end of this election cycle, and we will find out for certain in less than two months. It's right around the corner. So if you haven't registered to vote yet, please make sure you register to vote. And I'm not telling you who to vote for. I just want you to participate in our democracy. Yeah. So go to Get Involved in You, sign up through TurboVote, register to vote, vote on the person you think would be the best leader for our country and ultimately the leader for the world.
Let me give one
sure,
quick
Jeff.
election note. if you're voting in St. Louis County, this year you can vote at any polling place. It does not have to be your local precinct. It's just like it was in the last primary. They experimented with that. I just took the training to be a poll manager, and that's going to be the case for this election. So it doesn't matter where you live. If you pass a polling place on your way to work and there's a no line, you can pull in and vote there. If it's a long line, go to another polling place. They'll find the ballot for you. It's all done on the ballots generated by computer. So there's no excuse. The long lines will not keep you from voting.
Right, and that's a change made this year in particular for the pandemic. And so with that, thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today and for sharing your expertise. We really appreciate it. And I want to encourage everyone to reach out to all of our panelists if you've got questions after this, or you want to find out more. I'm sure they'll all be happy to talk with you more about the election as it gets closer. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Harp. Thank you, Dr. Lilly. Thank you, Dr. Kaiser. That, one last thing I want to bring you up to speed on is that next month we'll also be having a mock vote for Maryville. I want to tell you that since I've been at Maryville for almost 12 years, in every presidential election, we've had a mock vote. Usually it's held on campus, so usually it's an in-person voting where students would vote for whoever they thought was going to win the presidency in that particular year. Every year, Maryville has been right. This year, because of the pandemic, we're going online. So make sure that you'll get information about this, but just to let you know, make sure you go online and participate in our mock vote, as well as the real vote, if you're able to, and vote online for who you think will win. As goes Marysville, so goes the country. Let's see if we can keep our streak of being perfect predictors of who's going to win the vote. So that'll be coming up. You'll be seeing more information on that. As you can see, they'll be at the library, there'll be links, and we'll also make sure to post those on Get Involved MU. And that's it for this second session of the Honors Colloquium. And thanks to all of you from Honors who are here and those of you who are not in Honors and have joined us. I really appreciate you coming today. By the way, if there was put in the chat a link to click to add your attendance, I'll also be downloading who attended this from the webinar video software, but go ahead and click on that link that was put in the chat to make sure that your attendance is recorded on here. Our next, for those of you who are in Honors, our next Honors session is October 20th, and there we'll be talking about who's teaching in Honors in spring, what seminars will be offered, and give you an idea of what to register for next semester. So thanks to everyone who came. Thanks for everyone who participated. I hope you feel more educated about what's happening with the 2020 election, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.